आचार्यों ने वंदन करता
ओम नमो आयर्याणम्
उपाध्याय ने वंदन करता
ओम नमो उपाध्यायाणम्
सर्व साधु ने वंदन करता
नमो लोये सब साहूणम्
सम्यक दर्शन मुझने मर्जो
देशो पंचन मुक्तारो
सम्यक ज्ञान मुझने मर्जो
सर्वपाप परासनो
सम्यक चारित्र मुझने मर्जो
मंगलानं च सर्वेषु
नवपदनी आराधना करता
परमं अभय मंगलम् परमं अभय मंगलम् परमं अभय मंगलम्.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this really cold Sunday evening. Before I introduce our panelists, I just have to make one disclaimer that if you or someone you know is facing issues being discussed today, information that we're going to talk about and discuss is only for awareness and maybe some learning or just some interest, but it does not substitute for professional advice. So please consult your healthcare provider for support. Now, it is my absolute pleasure today to introduce our two panelists. We had advertised as having three fathers, but we have two really good ones, so that's fine. The first person I'd like to introduce to you is Nishad Gutka. I know Nishad's daughter Harsha really well. I'd let Nishad introduce himself to you.
Thank you very much, Shilpa, and hello everyone. My name's, as Shilpa said, Nishad Kutka. I live in the northeast area of Oshwal, so if you're ever in that area, do pop by. I'm the very happy dad of Hershey and Aishi. So Aishi is the somewhat adventurous one and always sort of makes sure that I'm kept in check on political correctness and all things to do with whether it's ethics or Bollywood and Hollywood scene. And Hershey's the one who giggles in her sleep. So yes, she actually giggles in her sleep. And she's also the one that won't let me sing with her, whether it's Stubborns or any other kind of song. She's also a very social person, so we're always late back home from wherever we go. And by the way, Hershey's the one with Down syndrome, and which basically affects her pace and ability to learn, as well as creates a few physical and sensory issues. And just to add a little bit to what Shilpa said around the disclaimer, I think, Vijay and I have each got about 2 decades worth of experience, but it's our experience, right? And we completely get the fact that everyone's going through either a different journey or they're at a different stage of their journey. So by no means are we suggesting anything we say here, it should be your situation. It's just hopefully if there's anything that you hear today that gives you a few tips or gives you some peace of mind, then, we're happier for it, for sure. Vijay, to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you all this evening. I'm married to the delightful Rina, who I'm sure a lot of you know. We have 3 kids, adult kids now, Ravi, Meera, and Akash. And Meera, my daughter, has learning difficulties. And she's the one who has given us a number of challenges in our journey, but also tremendous joy. And we've learned a lot from her view of the world, and ultimately a sense of humility. And I'd like to take the opportunity this evening to share some of the learnings that we had during our journey and 22 years of our life. Thank you.
Thanks, both of you. Pleasure to have you here. Now, before we start, I just thought I'd like to engage the audience a little bit. And while the audience cannot come in and talk to us, you can definitely type messages on the YouTube channel that you're watching right now. And what I'd like to do is ask you, for those dads that are watching that have children with disabilities, actually even mums, what is the one word you would use to describe your journey as a dad of a disabled child so far? Um, it is one word. I know it's really hard in one word, but it would be great if you could just let us know in your word what that would be. So thank you for that in advance. Now, Vijay,
Mhm.
I obviously know Mira really well,
Mhm.
as I do know Hershey as well. They're delightful girls, but obviously to get them here, to get them to this point, must have been challenging and continues to be probably. So, what has been your biggest challenge for you as a dad? Was there a specific turning point that you needed to apply, for example, an EHCP or any additional support for your children, for your child, for Mira?
Right. So, look, it was a journey that evolved over a time, and I'll be very upfront with you. Both Urin and I um, reached a point at different points. When she was Mira was very little. She hadn't hit all her standard sort of milestones, and you know it kept bugging Mira that so Urina that something was not quite right. The journey for me was still evolving. I hadn't quite registered the full impact that Mira was going to have, but over time we realized, and I certainly it dawned upon me that uh, um, Mira had difficulties, um, and I had to face that reality. Once I got over that, it was completely that reframing for me was completely right. We've got this, and we're going to have to do something as much as we can help her. And so it started with making sure we had provided support for her in terms of speech and language, OT. We did it off our own backs, making sure that we had the right schools for her. And we went through a number of schools in the early days until we found one suitable for her in Berkhamsted that dealt with children with behavioral issues, learning difficulties, and that was a turning point for us. And this was around June in 2009, so when she was about 7, where we found that there was a place for her that understood her, and for us to mingle with parents who had similar children, so that it was a learning environment for us as well. We could actually learn, because I'll be very honest with you, for the first few years prior to that, we were in mainstream schools. Both of us were trying to figure out what's going on here, and we felt very alone. It was not uh, part of it was in denial, but also part of it was let's explore, but it was very much alone. Once we had other parents we could share, and suddenly we realized that we weren't alone, and that was quite good for us personally, as well as a stable background for Mira around 2009. So she got that bit of stability. So that was great at that point. And then over time, in terms of EHCP, well, we did try before then. We went through the local parent partnership, and they told us, no, she's not going to qualify, and we didn't think any of it. It was 3 years into a school in Berkhamsted that when we started talking to parents, they said she would qualify. You need to persevere. And it was in 2012 that we made our initial application for a statement. And then I'll sort of dwell on that much later on subsequently, but that's when our journey began in terms of trying to get the support that we needed from the local authority.
Thank you, Vijay. Well, obviously that sounds hard, but you've described how what having other parents support has helped you. We've got one one member of the audience saying that for him, it seems that the one word he would describe it is nightmare, which is um, quite sad. And I wonder if Nishad, for you, it's been any different. Of course, it'll be different, but what was different, and how did you go about having, dealing with that turning point?
Yeah, sure. And, completely the word nightmare amongst many others also resonates. And it clearly is. It's a very complex legal system. It's a very complex regulatory system. And then on top of all of that, you've got all the local authorities and the local sort of health bodies and so on and so forth running their own kind of processes as well. So absolutely, that word is appropriate. In terms of turning point, I suppose one of the differences is that we knew Hershey would have Down syndrome before she was born, and we knew nothing about Down syndrome at that time. So I suppose all that sort of great deal of uncertainty and that sort of just general sense that, hey, this is not a typical pregnancy, parts of which you're always looking forward to, and other parts which you're not in a typical situation, just unfortunately didn't exist. It's not we weren't looking forward to it. We just didn't know what to expect. Turning points. I suppose the example I would give is that one of the turning points was when Hershey was sort of about 11 years old or approaching 11 years old and had to go and find a secondary school setting. And she was already in regular mainstream primary school. And we wanted to sort of, choose between whether it's a special school versus mainstream school. And then whichever one it is, which school would it be? Similar to what Vijay just described a moment ago. And there's a whole other discussion on what the pros and cons of each are. But I suppose the turning point for us was, we did what any parent would do, which is, do the research, talk to other parents, find out the school's credentials and conditions like this, and Ofsted reports, all that usual stuff, right? And we thought we'd identified what was a really good school, and guess what? It was local as well. So you'd imagine no problem whatsoever. But our application actually got rejected. And it got rejected even though it's a state-based school, it's local, etc., etc. And we went through various appeals and tried to reason with people at a human-to-human level. And none of it worked. And our only choice was to go through the courts. And again, that in itself is a process. And one of the steps in that process is going through some form of mediation or ensuring you can demonstrate you've been through mediation before you end up in high courts, right? And basically at mediation, what you have is you've got the school that you've applied to, which has rejected the application. You have the local authorities there, and you have the parents there, and you have a mediator just to make sure nothing gets out of hand and people stay as calm as they can, right? We spent 2.5 hours, robustly sort of giving all our reasons why she should be there, giving all the reasons that how they can cope, and also putting our case forward as assertively as we could, right? We also spent 2.5 hours of that same time listening to a whole bunch of excuses, one after the other, as to why they could not take her and why they would not take her. And it was really hard because it's really hard, just like in so many of these processes, not to take it feels personal because it's your kid, right? And it's your kid and they're talking about them or and you're feeling that it is personal. But I think the learning after 20 years is actually in very little cases is it personal. It is the process, it's the system, it's what it is,
Agreed.
right?
Agreed. Yeah.
after having, I suppose, endured through that, there was a break called by the mediator. And Kilner and I were in the tea room, literally stirring our cup of tea, and we looked at each other. By the way, Kilner's Hershey and Aisha's mum, for those that don't know. But oh yeah, and my wife as well. But so and we looked at each other and we said to each other, why are we doing this? And whilst the answer to that is obvious at the beginning, what we really meant was, why are we doing this, even though this school, this authority, have no intention of wanting this child, our child, there? Why would you place your kid into an environment where they're constantly going to find, instead of reasons for they're constantly going to be pulled up on their shortcomings to justify their decision of not taking that, right? Why would you want to do that? And I think that was that biggest turning point where, even though we had no plan B, we realized one thing, that, this school had clearly changed its agenda. It's more of an academy, it's more into the grades, the average grades, so on and so forth, right? Whatever it was. But the point is, I don't think any parent would want to place their child knowingly into an environment that does not want them, right? No matter what all the credentials and the research shows. And even though there was no plan B and it was scary as hell, the fact of the matter is, we felt calm. We walked back into the meeting feeling a sense of calmness, a sense of peace, and this almost maybe some sense of satisfaction to say, well, I can't swear on this, but there's,
Yeah.
yeah, I think you know what I'm going to say, right? But the point is, we could leave there knowing that we've got a challenge ahead to find a school that will nurture her, will tap into that unfulfilled potential. And that's what happened. In fact, she found a school which was 10 times better, and it was just as local. And it was, and she's the social person she is today for that particular school.
So Nisha, both Nishad and Vijay, it's different, but it's the same. I have two children who are now adults, but we were looking at schools at one point, secondary schools, and for me, it was that it was up to them which school they got into, no matter what I wanted for them. We had to take into account what they wanted and which school they wanted to go into and which ones they got into, right? And while it's difficult to accept or not, it's still not, the choices are wider, and we don't feel as parents that we can do anything differently. Whereas for you, there's quite a lot of pressure just on you guys to actually do what's needed for your child. And that pressure, what strategies, Nishad, did you use as coping mechanisms that helped you to navigate this? So you were calm at that point, but there must have been pressures that are involved there and then going on. So what did you use as coping mechanisms?
Yeah, and I think anyone on this call that's going through any stage of this journey, the calmness is sort of only noticeable because it happens on those rare moments, and the rest of it, feels like, a lot of people use the term battle. And I suppose the coping mechanism, and this is all, by the way, this is all in hindsight, right? It's sort of based on after having been through and being in the second decade, second, third, I don't know, second part of this decade, etc., right? And this battle mode you're in is a battle with, it feels like a battle with anything and everything, right? So I think the most important coping mechanism is recognizing now that there is a need for gaining different perspectives and approaches. Not one approach that you take as a person works all the time. So what I mean by this is that, you know, if you recognize that, look, there's at least two groups of people out there that you're dealing with. And luckily, the big group is made up of people who really who are working in these organizations, authorities, blah, blah, blah. And they really choose to work there because they want to make a difference, right? Their intention is to help people. That's why they chose that profession. Most cases, people don't choose it for the money, right? Most. So if you recognize that as a coping mechanism, you then sort of recognize that it's the system and the management maybe that they're having to operate in. And for those people, it's really sort of ineffective and unjust if we just constantly take a battle-driven approach of this, you know, aggressively assertive and just really gunning for it and, you know, and so on, because they're human as well and they're trying to do their best. Equally, there's another group, and that group is the exact opposite, either because of the process of the system they work in or because they don't want to do it, right? And for those groups, you need a different approach. And yes, there is the more assertive approach that's needed, but also being informed and being clued up and doing the research into the process and following that process is what helps get through. Now, in our case, very briefly, in our case, we've been really fortunate that, you know, it is Kilna and I, and we're both very different to each other in our approaches. So we can switch when we have to in terms of who's dealing with what at any one time. In many cases, it's sometimes just one individual dealing with it. We see a lot of that, and that works as well, right? Absolutely. But my advice in terms of coping strategies is whether you're alone or whether you're together, always have that self-check-in when you're in the midst of what feels like a battle to figure out, is this approach the right approach that we're taking, or do we need to do something different to break the cycle? Vijay, like, how much
Yeah,
of that resonates in your
I
experience?
think I agree with that, and I think because we're dealing with, as Nisha had said, dealing with multiple stakeholders, right? So, uh, basically, our parents. You've got the LEA and the LEA statement so coordinator. You've got the school, and then you're also uh, having to so in our case what we did was when we applied second time round for the assessment, um, we made an application. uh, we The authority said, yep, okay, we accept that she has needs and we think that there's a school for her in the borough that will be suitable for her. We at this stage we were already sending her to school in Berkhamsted where she was blossoming and it was a right fit for her. So we knew there was some challenges coming ahead. So we applied in February 12th. We got the statement around July, um, provisional statement, and it was very vague. And one of the things I learned here is that, and this is partly the professional training coming in, where you have to read every line, and I basically we went through it. This word is missing, this does not fit right. What does that mean? It's a very vague statement. Practically, what does that actually mean? Like, we say how many hours? Well, okay, but how many hours of teaching assistant does that mean? Like, who's going to be there? What so really granular detail. And we went back, said, this doesn't look right, this needs changing. And I think the authority suddenly realized that, okay, we're dealing with parents here who know what they're talking about. But in a nice way, we were saying, look, let's work together, let's work together, because the important person here is the child. Before you get involved in all the back and forth, don't forget it's a child here. But we also took a strategic view of taking engaging lawyers, special state, to get some insight as to how the process works, because we were getting ready that they're going to reject us, we're going to have to go for appeal. Now, surprisingly, for her primary education, they accepted everything we said. And they said, right, she's going to stay in that school and we are going to provide the support you need. But when it comes to secondary transfer, so this was September 14. So by the time we got this statement for primary level, it was around January 2013. We will consider that. So we knew we were going to go for a battle at secondary stage. But at that time, we engaged lawyers. We did a lot of research. We went to local schools. Urina did a lot of local school visits, gathering data, gathering whether that school would be a right fit for her, for Mira. And we built up a case, a solid, robust case that we could rebut down the line, because we knew that they were going to target this school, this school. We were ready. And it went back and forth. So when the secondary school transfers started happening, we got a provisional statement around January, February. It was March 2014. We got it, and again, we're not happy with it. We launched an appeal, and then around September time, clearly it was decided that we're going to have to go for a tribunal. And then, but what we had done is back in January 2014, we had engaged professional experts who could monitor Mira, assess Mira, but also willing to turn up as expert witnesses at the tribunal. So all of this, as much as you engage lawyers, a lot of it has to be driven by you as the client, as the parent. You got to start coordinating the LEA, the experts, the lawyers, but you got to be on top of it. And it became quite an all-consuming affair for those sort of 2.5 years. And as much as I was fronting it, responding to emails, reading line by line, Urina was there as person, because you get into the detail, and I'm the sort of person who likes to get into the detail. Sometimes I lose. She comes along and gives you much more of a macro view and makes me realize, okay, I'm going down a wrong path here. And it's really important that both of us, and I'm sure same with you, Nishad, talking and just making sure the priorities are right. I built up 3 lever arch files of paperwork, experts, and I tell you, the first page, every time I turned that file, the first page, I had a picture of Mira, because every time I opened that file, just a reminder what this is all about. It's about this young girl that we're trying to support. It's not about, oh, the LEI are horrible. As Nishad said, they're doing their job. We had to maintain decorum across the board and work with them. And it's always civil emails, and even the coordinator said, "Listen, I've never met people like you are." We almost like wanting to go out of their way to help, but obviously their hands are tied because they have to go through a different panel. But we got people on side to help, and by the time our tribunal was set for the end of November, and at the 11th hour, we were all getting ready to turn up, and they withdrew. They said, we're going to accept everything, and happened. But Nishad, you mentioned to me the other day that your coping mechanisms. I was so consumed by it. I just dealt with it, and it was, for me, it was just like, yeah, you got your work commitments, your home commitments, and then this, and you just get on with it. You deal with it. But somewhere along the line, clearly I was bottling up the pressure.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, regrettably, it was a time when we had a tribunal in November, and towards the end of October, I had a mild heart attack. So that really put the spanner in the works.
Yeah.
But so I was out of commission for a week in terms of I was in hospital. But even then, I was writing emails saying, right, can you do this? Writing the experts, can we make sure we were ready? But so pressure does come out in other ways, right? I'm not saying it's easy, but as long as you've got the support network, with your partner, you're all understanding. My one regret, though, is looking back. is I had two other boys growing up who were, my eldest was at the time about 15, so hitting that stage where they're looking at GCSEs and whatever. My youngest was just about to start secondary, and I look back and I do wonder whether they just grew up themselves because we were so focused on Mira. And thankfully, touch wood, they've turned out to be very self-sufficient and independent. But that's my regret. One regret, that I didn't have spend enough time as much as I would have. Yeah.
Yeah, Vijay, you know, a lot of it sort of resonates, I'm sure, with a lot of people on this who are watching this as well as myself. And it's like you say, the whole sort of the pressure does build up and you don't realize it. And yeah, I love your sort of story of the Leverage files. People wonder why I have so much paper or have so many files and so much paperwork, right? Most of it is literally this kind of stuff, right? And with different authorities. But just going back in terms of how the pressure can manifest itself and then affect you as either parents or guardians, right? Because it's a really important point. And I don't know how you feel about it, but I think one of the other coping mechanisms, it's wonderful that social media is so prevalent, and it's wonderful that online there are so many groups nowadays compared to, say, 10, 15 years ago that you can connect with to sort of find people going through similar experiences. And I think I'd highly recommend that. And I think that's what's great about Oshwal doing it, because hopefully within the community, we can be a bit more expressive and open about things so we can help each other out, right? Because you have to be lawyer, defender, and as I think Smita had once said, warrior as well, right? But warrior, not warrior. That's maybe that as well, right? But I think one point that comes to mind when you sort of spoke about that, especially around, physical or mental health, is that with all those groups, there are some groups that will largely focus on the negativity and the cynicism and the skepticism because it's their only outlet for either the guardians, the parents, or whoever it is to release. And that's perfectly fine because those release mechanisms need to be there. However, what I would suggest is always go out and find people who disagree with you, right? Because simply because you believe that there is one way, that's cool, or that therapy or that intervention is needed, doesn't actually mean that it's going to be that beneficial compared to something else, or the approach could be different, right? If you have a mix of people who agree but also disagree with you, it makes it a lot easier. Yes, it's tougher time-wise, right? But the problem with just being on forums that agree with you is consequently they could have an impact on your effectiveness, if not mental health, because ultimately you're surrounded by not a way out, just where you are. You're stuck in a rut, right? And that's, I don't know if Vijay, if you've got any opinions on that.
No, absolutely, and this is where when we engaged the lawyers, it was almost like a reality check because lawyers would say, right, well, this is what the law is, and too often people are sort of arguing over points. It's not because of the authorities being resistant. This is the way they go through a very process-driven way. It's not about, oh, it's so obvious this person should be qualifying, but it's not like that. And they bring you down to earth, but to also they will tell you that you're barking up the wrong tree.
Mm.
So that was helpful. It was the having that access to the lawyer helped in the sense that as much as you do the driving, they actually give you some get outs and say, well, you got to let that go, give it up, let's move this, you have to go down that road. And you need that someone objective like that. But throughout the whole process, I think um, Urin and I think we were aligned in terms of how we approach it. But it was, I valued her input because, you know, she saw things differently to the way I was. I was looking at it in a very uh, legalistic way. She was like bringing in some of the softer issues, which were as important, especially when we were writing up our parental contribution, which was a really valuable document because it actually set out what it means to have a child with these difficulties and how that environment would impact them. And you know, it was important that we consulted each other and said, right, this is the way it happens. So
Thank you. Both your stories are quite insightful. Again, if I bring it to someone like me, I would say we're warriors too, but for us, we're just trying to keep our kids fed, our kids get to school, you know, our kids go to their after school, whatever. So this brings up a completely different view on what pressure is as a parent. And of course, you two had other children as well. And what I've heard amongst the enabling network community that we've built up here is that some parents, it's important to note this, that some parents have actually just got so many other things going on. They leave their child in the hands of the school. And sometimes you get really lucky as well. There's that aspect of it where you get really lucky and the school pulls you through, the school pulls the child through, and the child has grown up lucky, you know, because they've had the support they need from wherever they have been, or it's been recognized. So I think that's important to state here as well. While you really have to fight and you really have to be on it to get them to wherever they need to go, wherever you need them to go. There are certain parents who can't, and sometimes those kids also get lucky. It's a real mixed bag, and I think, I mean, I know both Urvina and Kilner quite well, and I think you all sing from the same hymn sheet in terms of focusing on what is needed. I think you do it in different ways. I think if your wives were going to listen to you, think no, but we did most of the work. But I don't, you know, it's fine whichever way you get your coping mechanisms. But
Can I just put my own personal disclaimer in? So
yes,
anything I've said,
do that,
on this
Nisha.
call, it is actually Kilner that does all the work. So just to make sure I'm legally covered.
Okay, no,
But
joking.
but in all
Joking.
seriousness, Shilpa, if I may, I think that is the essence of the problem. The more we go through these challenges and battles and situations, and Vijay put it really nicely in this thing, you have to be you have to be on top of it. You have to be very switched on. You have to be very you have to have some kind of level of, I don't know, education in order to deal with the system. And I know Kuna, and I'm sure there's many of you guys who work in these other groups outside in the larger community outside of Oshwal. And there are a lot of peer parents out there who don't have that backup, who do not have that ability, time, capacity, capability, whatever it is, to put up that challenge and the fight. And you know what? I think as a community, just as much as we do volunteering and outreach, and these webinars are great because hopefully they will sort of help people in the community, but also we need to do more outreach work with, ourselves, to use our experience to help others, because one of the forums Kelner works for, there are phone calls from very distraught parents, single parents in many cases, who are at, their breaking point. So there's a real need out there.
Mm. Thank you. Us as Enabling Network, we try our very best. And I think just running our enabling sports and social sessions means parents get together. These kind of webinars that we're doing hopefully will help. And anyway, let's see. We're doing what we can, but you're right, we can always do more. One thing that so there's all these challenges. You use coping mechanisms, but at some point, do you stop to take stock? How do you recharge yourself? How do you physically do that? Do you, in this day of maintaining your own mental health, your own physical health, how do you go about doing that, Nishad, if I may come to you?
Probably not do that enough. And because you're constantly having to think about something which is not going to just naturally happen, right? Whether it's in the area of education, health, well-being, community, whatever, right? I think that some of the social groups certainly help because it means that there's that level of sort of being in it together and recognizing that everyone's got very different challenges in their lives, and everyone has, irrespective of whether it's special needs or not. But it's a real tough one. It's and I must say I'm not quite sure how to actually answer that or offer any advice because I certainly haven't mastered it.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely fine, Vijay. Do you have anything?
I mean, look, this was like 10, 12 years ago when you have like work pressures, you had this dealing with this, and I, to be honest, I didn't think about any of it for myself. It was just all, if it's not work, it's this, and you had to keep that momentum going. Like when you get like emails from the authority you have to respond. You can't just sit on it and, well, I'll deal with it in a week's time, literally. And I think they got pretty, they could not handle the amount of emails I was turning around because they said, right, okay, well, it's back in their court now. They have to respond. And, authorities work at a pace where, because they're dealing with 1,500 other cases as well. But I mean, the let out for me was, it was just, if I wasn't doing anything, then I would feel that I'm not doing enough. So it was very all consuming at the time.
Oh,
So it wasn't so much, oh, I need some time, I need to get away from this. No, no, no. That was the last thing on my mind.
well,
I think, yeah,
um,
sorry. I suppose, what I would offer up, and Vijay sort of mentioned this earlier when he's got that picture of, his daughter in front of these really heavy duty files, right? Ultimately, it is about them, right? And what I mean by that is that's not the reason why you should just continue the fight because, you've got to check in yourself as to which battle is worth fighting and be, tactical or strategic, whatever for it. But what I mean by this is that, you know what, things do sometimes just fall into place without you actually seeing them falling into place, and taking, I suppose one coping mechanism is really just taking the time to understand them, and as a dad, I don't know if this applies to all dads, I'm sure it doesn't, but your bond and your connectedness or sense of connectedness happens in the later years with your child, or that's what I found, right? And now I find myself having conversations with either one of my daughters that gives me such great sort of, I know, sense of ease that, you know what, they're actually enjoying life. They're doing what they're doing etc. Of course, you worry about the future. You worry about so many things in the future, right? As a parent, right? But there is that sense of coping when you sort of see that, you know what, they're still enjoying it. They're still, you know, doing what they love and being who they are. And let's not forget that either.
Yeah, and what special girls they are. I mean, when we see them at our social clubs, sports clubs, anything we do as Enabling Network, it brings all of us so much joy because they live in the now and they teach you how to do that. It's brilliant, you know, how they've turned out. So I have two threads I'd like to pick before we run out of time. And there's one thing is what of going ahead now? These girls are young adults now. What are your thoughts about going forward? And if you could go back in time, so we're talking about at one hand going forward, and if you go back in time, what would you tell your younger self when you first learned about your child's diagnosis? So it's very, very opposite. But I was hoping both of you could tell me each one of it in the last 15 minutes that we have left.
Well, like, okay, so once you get the EHCP statement, it doesn't end there, right? Because that's just a piece of paper. You still have to then go through school, you know, make sure things are ticking over. Because ultimately, right, it's all about supporting that child, right? And then there are annual reviews. And I don't know about you, Nishad, but when you read those annual review documents, all written black and white, and you see some of the comments in that talking about your child, I had to take. It was quite heart wrenching because it's like, you know, the Samantha, the problems they lay out, and but you know that's a reality, right? That you have to get over. There's that. So, but she's in a beautiful environment, supportive environment, but it's going to end because what Rina were worried about is that she was hitting 16. Thankfully, the school had this sixth form, so she could stay on. But ultimately, that was it. She was going to hit the real world. She was going to go to college, which is a different battle, like in terms of how she's going to cope because she's been in this sheltered environment. Suddenly, she's out there. So the worry never ends. For me, you said something about that. Oh, you send them to school. School will deal with it. That's a big pressure off you. But you know, during COVID, when she was home, we were all homebound. Urina was the only one going out to work. She was at the hospital. I learned a lot from Mira then because I was working from home. She was sitting next to me doing her online lessons. It brought home to me how she viewed the world because I could see it when she was attending lessons. She was taking in the information, how she took it, and it was a real eye opener for me, and it really enabled me to realize, okay, this person, um, I have to look at her in a different way. How she views the world, how she breaks down the world, and what I learned was you can't expect the normal achievements, right? Every little, like she would have 10 steps she has to achieve. She may only make 1, 2, 3. Accept that. That's a victory. Celebrate that with her and work at it. 2, 3 months down, she might achieve step 4. Brilliant. But don't expect her to just get it all sorted there and then within a week and it's move on. It was slow accretion of steps, and I really learned about that, and that was, it was an eye opener for me. and I think that answering that question going backwards, if I'd known that all this beforehand, it's going to be interesting, but things are going to be up and down, but things will work out if you just have faith and faith in the child and look through things through that child's lens and not through your lens. Don't worry, just it will work out, but you just got to be patient. But there'll be challenges along the way. But that's easier said than done now, looking back
Yeah,
20,
of
10,
course.
15 years.
As Nishad keeps saying, everything is with hindsight. You are
Yes.
saying what you're saying.
Mm,
How
mm.
about you, Nishad? What would you say to your
Yeah,
young?
I suppose that two-parter question, and I suppose that it now may be another opportunity for any parent, any guardian, any grandparent, any uncle, aunt, whoever's listening in, if you can on YouTube, just write down what do you wish for the person, whether they're your child, your grandchild, your niece, nephew, whoever. What do you wish for? Because your first question, and please write that down because I'm absolutely fascinated. Because we spend so much of our lives thinking about the more transactional things, whether it's academics or the grades or the job or the other things, right? That it's very easy to forget about living in the present, as Vijay just described.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And again, as a dad, for me, the worries are, in 10 years, 15, 20, 30, you know, as our situation as parents change, being around for them, clearly, right? But your second part of the question was, what would you tell your younger self? I think the first thing I'd tell my younger self if I had a time machine is probably look after your hair because, I actually had quite a lot of hair and very thick hair, 20 years ago. So, clearly, that's probably the better advice I could give myself. But in all seriousness, wherever you are in your journey, especially those that are just at the beginning stages, pace yourself,
Yeah.
right? Seriously, pace yourself as individuals, as families. It's not a race. You're not going to win just one race. You're going to lose races. It's more of a series of marathons. And unfortunately, it is for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Right. That's the reality of the thing. You'll be constantly running different marathons on different courses and different cities every single time. And there'll be surprises, there'll be falls, all that kind of stuff. So, whilst, I think, what does pacing yourself mean? Well, you only individuals can figure it out. Maybe it is what you were mentioning earlier, looking after your physical self. Maybe it is about carving time out for others in the family as well, right? So yeah, I suppose figure that out. Because it's at the end of the day, whilst the battles will just continue to be there, the fact of the matter is, if I looked back 10, 20 years ago and thought about what I wished for and where both my girls are now, completely two different things. And guess what? I couldn't have them in a better place where they are now. And that's not to say I've done my job I haven't. I probably haven't. I could have done a better job. I don't know, right? The point is, they themselves are happy. One giggles in their sleep. The other one is a joy to travel with. So, I couldn't have expected either of those really simple things. So, yeah.
Perfect. That is a great place to be, I think, Nishad. We've got some comments here saying they can maintain a sense of community, which your girls absolutely do. Live as independently as possible, wholesome lives, and be happy.
Yeah, and,
Um,
and 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 on that, I mean, I do have challenge with that because Irina is trying to make Mira very independent. I can't bring myself. I'm always there, and I'll do everything for her, much to her and Mira Irina's annoyance. But Mira doesn't seem to mind. But I don't know. It's a father thing, but even though I know deep down she should be able to do things, I just can't help myself. I just have to go the extra mile because it just makes me feel wanted, I suppose. But
Vijay, you're not on your own there. I actually walk out of the room every time Kilner wants to discuss independent living or residential college, anything like that.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So now you said it in public. Guess what, Nishad? Our next conversation at our EM club. Anyway, listen, guys, it has been very interesting. I hope anyone out there who's been listening has found some motivation, some learning, or just some interest. Understand what, if you're not part of a family that has a disability, understand what other people are going through as well. I feel that I want to thank you, honestly thank you, because it's not easy to say these things out here. And hopefully we will continue with these kind of webinars. Our webinars, our Living Beyond the Barriers is a series of webinars. So different topics, different times. Our next one is going to be on the 19th of January. We will be advertising it. And so I'd like to say, watch this space. But thank you so much for coming on here and being completely open and honest. And if anyone wants to reach out to us as Enabling Network, both Nishad and Vijal are Enabling Network dads. If anyone has any topic they want discussed or would like to come onto our webinars, please do contact us at en@oshwal.org. We'd be more than happy to accommodate. As I said, we have a series. We can take this anywhere you guys want to go. The next people to thank are our audiences who, last time you were with us. This time, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for engaging with us through the chats. This is on YouTube, so if anyone wants to have a view of it, if anyone wants to have a view of it, please, they can go to the Oshwal website, get onto the YouTube channel, and hear us any time.
And Shilpa, if I may say, if anyone wants to contact Nishad or I'm happy just to have a chat, because it's really important. Like if you've having another parent talking, just to share thoughts or just listening from a different angle, more than happy to do so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really appreciated. Thank you so much. I'm sure you will be inundated, but let's see. And I'd like to thank the Zoom team, last but not least, who've done very well with us today. They bear with us every time we have to adjust cameras or take off glasses, put on glasses, anything we have to do. So thank you so much, Philip. I know you're somewhere in the background. On that note, I wish you a good evening.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
हरिहंत प्रभु ना दर्शन करता
ॐ नमो हरिहन्ताणम्
सिद्ध प्रभु ना दर्शन करता
ॐ नमो सिद्धाणम्
आचार्यों ने वंदन करता
ॐ नमो आयर्याणम्
उपाध्याय ने वंदन करता
ॐ नमो उपध्यायाणम्
सर्व साधु ने वंदन करता
नमो लोये सब साहूणम्
सम्यक दर्शन मुझने मर्जो
देशो पंचन मुक्तारो
सम्यक ज्ञान